We're gonna start this story where it ends. Luffy and the Straw Hats just fought against an admiral of the Navy and some pacifistas, but a wrench was thrown in. Warlord of the Sea Kuma also made his way to the fight and sent every other Straw Hat away. Luffy has no idea if his friends that he's gotten stronger to protect are even alive anymore, and the only thing he can ask is what's wrong with himself. Despite his training and the terrible circumstances that they've already overcome, Luffy wasn't able to save any of his friends that he would give his life for. In all honesty, he would probably have preferred to have given up his life, but that isn't what happened, and he's left all alone. Despite having the help of the right-hand man of the King of the Pirates himself, he wasn't able to save his friends, and he also wasn't able to save himself, as Kuma uses the powers that he used on his friends to also send him away. The Sabaody Archipelago arc then ends as the narrator himself says that the Straw Hat Pirates were just eradicated. This was the most jarring way to end a One Piece arc at the time that it came out, because even though things were bad at the end of the Whiskey Peak and Water 7 arcs, there was still hope. After Whiskey Peak, even though one of Vivi's closest friends was seemingly killed, she still had the Straw Hats on her side, and the Straw Hats were together and knew who the enemy was. After Water 7, even though they weren't able to save Robin before she got to Eni's lobby, the Straw Hats were still together and would go to whatever lengths it took to get their friend back, even if she didn't want to be saved. Most importantly though, even though things were very serious, we still had a Luffy that was determined to right the wrongs that happened to the people that he cared about. We don't have any of that at the end of Sabaody Archipelago. Not only are the Straw Hats either separated or dead, we have a Luffy that feels completely powerless for the first time in the entire story. Sure, there was that moment in the first chapter where he was upset that he couldn't land a punch on Higuma the bear, but this was an anger that he was gonna carry with him. The Luffy in this moment feels so powerless that he doesn't even try to swing back against Kuma as he just whisks him away. It's an insane way to end an arc, especially at this point in the story, but how did we get here? Well, in order to figure that out, we have to go back to the beginning, and the Sabaody Archipelago arc of course starts after the crazy events of the Thriller Bark, as the Straw Hats have their new crew member and are saying goodbye to the friends they met along the way. We had no idea how important those friends would become down the line, but they were still nice to have either way. Thriller Bark can still be seen in the background, but that doesn't stop us from getting the through line for the entire saga that's about to unfold. Towards the end of the last arc, we learned more about Vivre cards and what they can say about the people they're tracking, and learned that Ace isn't in the best shape after his fight with Blackbeard. Nami of course asked Luffy about this because she knows how much he cares about Ace, but Luffy says that they aren't gonna go help him because he has his own adventures. This is something that Luffy surely regrets to this day, but it's also showing in how much Luffy cares about Ace's opinion of him. The first chapter and episode also sets up the other important through line of this saga, and that's the fact that it marks the halfway point in the Straw Hats' journey. This is the very last island before the New World, and that's really important because that's obviously where the One Piece is. It seems like our Straw Hats are so close because even though this only means that they're halfway there, it's been so long that it seems like they're already ready to fight the biggest and baddest opponents out there. This saga is what shows us that they couldn't have been more wrong about that sentiment. Even the reader feels this way about the Straw Hats at this point. I mean, sure, they were only able to survive the last arc because of Zoro's sacrifice at the end of it, but they took down another one of the Warlords of the Sea, which seemed to be pretty powerful in their own right. If only the reader knew how wrong they were, but I think that that's what makes the ending of this arc sting as much as it does. Now this first chapter sets up a lot, and it's got even more for us because it also introduces us to a little mermaid named Kami at the end. The Straw Hats end up saving her from a sea rabbit that she was trapped inside of, and she's responsible for the most satisfying moment in the entire arc. Well, now that we've been introduced to her, the beginning of this arc is the typical fun that the beginning of each One Piece arc is. It's through Kami that the Straw Hats meet and befriend the Flying Fish Riders led by Duval, and run into an old enemy from the Arlong Park arc, Hachi. Hachi always felt out of place on Arlong's crew, like he was way nicer than the rest of them, and he's been spending his time away from them just making takoyaki and selling it to people. He's also the catalyst for the most satisfying moment in the entire arc, and it's all because he wanted to do nothing more than to show Nami that he was sorry about the way that she was treated. Another example of Oda using old characters in a great way, but it's because of this encounter that the Straw Hats learn about the Sabaody Archipelago. They then of course go there because there's no adventure that they won't go on, and that's when we get the classic Straw Hat split up that happens in every arc. Brook, Robin, Luffy, Nami, Chopper, Hachi, and Kami all go to explore the archipelago, Sanji and Usopp watch the ship because of their very specific reasons, and Zoro decides to go on a walk on his own where he immediately gets lost. This leads to another really fun part of this arc as the Straw Hats and their new friends explore the archipelago that seems to be one of the most fun places in the world. They go shopping, they have fun with these weird bubble things, and everything seems to be going great before a guy with a chain on his neck starts screaming about how he doesn't want to die. This guy is a slave with a bomb collar around his neck, and as soon as he gets far enough away from his master, it explodes. This not only introduces the concept of slavery into the One Piece world, it also introduces us to the most despicable people in it, the Celestial Dragons. From their first appearance, you can tell how uppity they are, as they wear clothes that nobody else wears, and they even have air bubbles so they don't have to breathe the same air as everybody else. They even go over to the guy that just blew up and start talking about how he was just a mere human, and that he shouldn't care about his family anymore since he's now their property. Luffy of course wants to go over there and stop him because that's the type of person he is, but Hachi stops him and we learn just who these guys are. The Celestial Dragons are the descendants of the 20 royal families that came together 800 years ago to create the world government. This gives them the power to do pretty much whatever they want, so much power in fact that a Navy admiral gets summoned if you so much as harm one. This of course catches Luffy by surprise as him and the Straw Hats got a taste of an admiral's power when they got attacked by Aokiji at the end of Long Ring Long Land. The introduction of the Celestial Dragons starts the incredibly dark part of this arc as we start to learn about their abuse of power and the very huge problem of slavery in the One Piece world. This is just a taste of the terrible things that happen in this arc, but they don't immediately stop the good time that the Straw Hats are having. They even learn about the more lawless nature of the archipelago as some bounty hunters come out of nowhere trying to collect the bounty on Luffy's head. It's a really short thing, and it's the first time that we've seen bounty hunters in quite a while, but it's cool to see that some of them are still operating. It's after they deal with these bounty hunters that they go to a place called Shaki's Ripoff Bar and meet another really important character in this arc. They meet this lady named Shaki, and she's one of Hachi's friends that he promised the Straw Hats he would take them to. They're here for something that I forgot to mention earlier, the fact that the Straw Hats need a special coating on their ship in order to get to the next island in the chain. Shaki isn't the one that does the coating though, it's her husband, and he's been gone for about 6 months. This means that the Straw Hats have to go find him, and he likes to hang around the amusement park, so that's where they're gonna go next. But that's before Shaki says something about Luffy and Zoro being 2 of 11, and we of course have to learn what she's talking about. It's here where we learn about the Supernovas, 11 rookie pirates that have a bounty over 100 million berries, and just so happen to all be on the archipelago at the same time. Zoro and Luffy are of course a part of them, but other members include Capone Bedge, Jewelry Bonnie, Basil Hawkins, Eustace Kid, Scratchman Apu, X-Drake, Arouge, Killer, and Trafalgar Law. One of them even has a higher bounty than Luffy, and they all just so happen to take a different initial path than the Straw Hats chose after Reverse Mountain. It's kinda hard to believe given how important they've been to the story, but Oda didn't originally plan on even making these guys characters, but decided to add them while he was writing this chapter because of an editor's advice. We almost didn't get some of the best characters in the entire story, and it's almost impossible to believe that the Dressrosa saga would have been as good without Law as a character. They actually play a pretty important role in this arc when the Navy gets involved, and we also get the establishing of the 2 biggest rivalries that Luffy has with the Supernovas. Luffy also asks if the coding guy is gonna be okay with all these dangerous pirates on the loose, but Shaki foreshadows how powerful this guy is when she says that he's 100 times more powerful than anybody else on the island. If only the Straw Hats and the readers knew the important figure that they were about to meet. After this, we once again get a montage of the Straw Hats having fun on the archipelago, unaware of the danger lurking in the background as some human traffickers have their eyes on Kami. It really is framed in a way that makes you feel like everybody is safe, but that's when we cut away from them and meet one of the most hated characters in the entire series. To be honest, all the Celestial Dragons are despicable and should be hated, except for one that get introduced later, but this guy Saint Charlos just hits different. And it's obvious that Oda wants him to be worse than the rest, because he's introduced with all of his bodyguards beside him while he's riding a slave that's clearly on his last legs. He starts off by complaining about how slow this guy is moving, and then forces some doctors to stop treating a guy with terrible wounds so they can bow while he walks through. He then tells his bodyguard to throw the guy off the stretcher and just decides that one of the nurses is gonna be his wife. This makes her wife number 13, but he's also gotten bored of wives 1 through 5, so he wants them taken away from the Holy Land and brought back down to normal society. Then then, to make things even worse, he shoots the lady's fiance when he tries to say that she's already engaged to him, and forces his bodyguards to take her to the harbor as she's kicking and screaming. It's after he does this that we see a very familiar figure walking down the street towards the situation that's currently unfolding. It's of course Zoro, and this is such a great piece of writing from Oda because of the situation and irony that it creates. The reader knows just how big of a problem these celestial dragons are, and even some of our characters do, but Zoro isn't one of them. Zoro knows nothing about these celestial dragons, so he doesn't bow, and just keeps walking as he asks the guy if he needs directions. Charlos can't believe that a normal human would dare stand in his presence, so he goes to shoot Zoro, and he has no idea how bad of an idea that was. Zoro, being the no-nonsense person that he is, immediately goes to strike Charlos down, but luckily Bonnie comes in at the last second and saves everybody there. Charlos is confused at first because he's sure that he missed, but him and his crew eventually leave the area, and Zoro goes to take the guy that got shot to the hospital. This sparks a lot of reactions from the supernovas that saw, most of them realizing how crazy Zoro is, but I think that Bonnie's reaction is the most interesting. She just can't believe that Zoro is going out of his way to help someone that he doesn't know, and I think that this does a great job of highlighting how the Straw Hats are different. It's really easy to forget that the pirates in One Piece are criminals for a reason. Not all of them are like that, and we were also reminded of that by the fact that Kid has a higher bounty than Luffy because he likes to attack innocent people as he goes on his journey. It really shows two ends of the extreme when it comes to these rookie pirates, because all of the bad ones that we've seen in the story so far have been in the game for a long time. We then cut away from that encounter and learn that Kami has been taken by some human traffickers, so it looks like the Straw Hats are gonna have to crash a slave auction. Sanji calls in the Flying Fish Riders, while Luffy and the group learn about how fishmen just started being seen as humans 200 years ago, so a lot of people still look down on them. This means that Kami got kidnapped for more than just being a mermaid, and we get to see that as she's getting put in a cell before the auction. The guy doing it starts slapping her around and even calls her an it when she keeps talking after he slaps her to the ground. It actually looks like things are about to get a lot worse, but that's when this guy gets knocked out of nowhere, and we're introduced to another really important character moving forward. It's here where we're introduced to the former right-hand man of the King of the Pirates, Silver's Rayleigh. It's also here we learn that he's the guy that coached ships so they can go to Fishman Island, so the Straw Hats are gonna have an encounter with this guy no matter what. This is another thing this arc does well, because looking back, we're introduced to a lot of important characters that still have roles to this day. The Celestial Dragons, Supernovas, and Rayleigh are still incredibly important figures in the One Piece world, and without this arc, we wouldn't know nearly as much about them as we do today. Speaking of the Supernovas, a lot of them are at the slave auction that the Straw Hats are about to crash, and they of course play an important role in that. Speaking of that auction, we're gonna skip right to it, but there is an important moment that happens before it, as Nami herself says that they're gonna buy Kami back if they aren't allowed to fight. This is a really crazy thing for her to say, given how much Nami cares about money, but it just goes to show how far every Straw Hat is willing to go when it comes to their friends. There's a reason that Luffy chose each member for his crew, and they show that with each passing arc. Well, we get to that auction, and the Straw Hats have more than enough to buy Kami with their 200 million berries, but Charlos really wants a mermaid, so he bids 500 million. The power of the Celestial Dragons is more than political, and now the Straw Hats really don't have a way to get Kami back without fighting. It looks like everything is going to shit, and the Straw Hats are just gonna have to let this guy take Kami, but this is when Luffy literally falls from the sky. He crashes the auction and then immediately goes to save Kami because that's the type of guy he is, and Hachi literally breaks his disguise to try to stop him. This makes things go from bad to worse because everybody in the auction house now knows that Hachi is a fishman. And just like the rich and powerful in the real world, they show their true colors and immediately start being the racist pieces of shit that they are. It's always the elite in society too, because Nami was literally tortured by fishmen for years and still doesn't have the same prejudice as these people do. Now I do realize that I'm complaining about the racism of people that are about to buy slaves, but I think that Oda does a great job of writing characters that you're supposed to hate. Now in the commotion of it all, with Luffy flying through the ceiling and everybody freaking out because of the fishmen, the worst possible thing happens. Luffy is trying to fight his way through the guards to get to Kami when we hear a gunshot and see that Charlos has shot Hachi. Then, in one of the most powerful shot showing the corruption in the One Piece world, Charlo starts dancing and celebrating because he shot him. Everybody in the auction hall then starts talking about Hachi with the gross prejudice that they have, while Kami starts crying about the friend that she thinks she just lost. This also enrages Luffy because of the way that one of his friends is being treated, and this leads to a slow walk up. Everybody knows what's gonna happen, and we know the consequences of the action, so Hachi tries his hardest to stop Luffy from what he's about to do. He tries so hard that he even says that him getting shot is all his fault, despite the fact that he obviously didn't do anything wrong and just wanted to help his friend. The desperation is portrayed so well, not only through Hachi's actions and words, but also by the way that we get to see every single Straw Hat's reaction to what went down. Every single Straw Hat is visibly angry and distraught about what's happening, and it all comes to a head when Charlo says that Hachi continuing to speak is annoying him. As the reader, we already knew what was gonna happen, and the Straw Hats did too, but everybody else in the auction hall just starts to freak out when they see Luffy start to walk towards Charlos. Luffy then provides the most satisfying punch in the story so far, and the most satisfying punch to this day, as he punches the absolute shit out of Charlos. Despite knowing the consequences of his actions, Luffy smashes the piece of shit Celestial Dragon for what he's done to his friend. This is a really weird point for this arc, because it's really satisfying to see Luffy give this guy a taste of his own medicine, but there's a looming threat on the horizon, because the Navy and an admiral are going to be here very soon. After the punch, there are also a lot of different reactions from the people in attendance, from the normal people running away, the other supernovas impressed with the fact that Luffy actually did that, and the other Straw Hats wishing that they did the same thing. Everything is about to go to shit, the regular people are running out of the auction hall, but the Straw Hats are steadfast with their captain's decision, and now know that things are about to get a little bit wild. Things have gotten wild for the Straw Hats before, and they've always gotten out of it, so what's to say that this time is going to be any different? Once again, if only the Straw Hats, and specifically Luffy, knew the type of pain that they were about to go through. That being said, things initially go well for the Straw Hats as they fight back against the Celestial Dragons and their guards in the auction hall. Things get mixy, Luffy talks to Law for the first time, and Charlos' dad goes to kill Kami since the Straw Hats are trying to rescue her. Things are getting wild, and they only get wilder as the slaves that were about to be auctioned off make their way from the back because of the commotion. This means that we've got Rayleigh and the Straw Hats in the same room together for the first time, and this first interaction doesn't disappoint in the slightest. That's because it opens with Rayleigh using Conqueror's Haki on everybody in the room, and the only people left standing are the ones that are powerful enough. Rayleigh then says that Luffy's Straw Hat fits well on a person like him, and that he's wanted to meet Luffy for a long time now. Now this reveal of Rayleigh knowing exactly who Luffy is, and the significance of the Straw Hat was so big at this point in the story. This was before we knew that Rayleigh was the guy disciplining Buggy and Shanks, so the fact that Roger's first mate knows who Luffy is amazing. You honestly don't know what he wants with the kid, but you know that their interaction is going to be legendary, so you can't wait for it to happen. The legendary interaction is right in front of us, but it has to be put on hold because the Navy is here and ready to take the Straw Hats in for what they did to Charlos and his family. We also get the reactions of the other supernovas that didn't witness what Luffy did firsthand, and it's obvious that our Straw Hats have some more enemies for once they reach the new world. We also get some foreshadowing teasing the admiral that's about to show up on the island, and the war between the Whitebeard pirates and the 7 warlords of the sea. Once again, if only we knew just how crazy and emotional this eventual battle would turn out to be. After this, we once again get a little fun part of the arc as the Supernova trio fights some marines after Rayleigh frees all the potential slaves from their bomb collars. It's really cool to look back on, especially after the events of Wano where the 3 of them took out 2 Yonkos, and seeing them try to one-up each other even at this point in the story is really cool. Like even now they want to do everything themselves, and this is just the beginning of the hilarious rivalries that we see at the beginning of the raid in Wano. This battle is really fun. We got to see Law and Kid's powers for the first time, and they're just bickering back and forth through it all, but there is a bad omen as soon as they go their separate ways. Kid ends up running into what looks like Kuma, and after seeing what this guy is capable of during Thriller Bark, that's a huge problem. This is just such an ominous thing to see now, and it's safe to say that things would have gone a lot better if this was actually Kuma like everybody thought. We get to see Kid and Law start to fight Kuma, but we quickly cut away from it as the Straw Hats have followed Rayleigh back to Shaki's bar. Oda showing this battle first is important though, because it tells the reader of the danger without the Straw Hats knowing about it, so it's gonna be an even bigger surprise for them. Speaking of the Straw Hats, they're of course at Shaki's bar, and the conversation is pretty mild at first, first, with them just freaking out about the fact that Rayleigh used to sail with Roger. We also get the amazing moment where Brooke remembers Roger being a rookie, and that just adds to the cool factor for the newest Straw Hat. Rayleigh talks about his great times with Roger, and how the crew went their separate ways after Roger got sick and decided to turn himself in. He also talks about how Shanks was the one to tell him about Luffy, and that Luffy definitely hasn't disappointed now that he's met him. This part of the talk is so cool because you can tell that it's an old man that looks back at his past with such fondness that he's actually content with how things went. He really looks back on his adventure fondly, and he's really happy that Roger and the rest of his crew were able to inspire the pirates of today. It's a great conversation, but the sort of peace that the Straw Hats have found after the auction hall incident is about to end because we quickly cut to one of the coldest character introductions in the entire series. The Admiral Kizaru is here to fuck shit up, and he literally comes in riding on a cannonball. It looks really cool in the manga, but the way that the colors pop with the sound effects of the explosion in the anime when he lands just makes the moment way cooler. We cut right back to the Straw Hats and Rayleigh after this, but with all of the danger that Oda is setting up in the background, things can go from good to bad very quickly. This part of the conversation with Rayleigh is even better than the first though, because we get two really great questions that lead to some really great responses. Robin asks Rayleigh what the will of D is, because we all know that she wants nothing more than to know the true history of the world. Rayleigh actually has all of the answers to all of her questions, because the Roger crew is the only one other than the higher-ups in the world government that know the true history of the world, but we know that we aren't gonna hear it here. It also wouldn't be satisfying if she didn't figure it out herself, so she decides to double down on her decision that she made in Enies lobby and continue to put her faith in Luffy. Usopp then decides to ask Rayleigh if the One Piece is actually on the final island, and this leads to one of my favorite Luffy moments in the entire series. He absolutely freaks out on Usopp, saying that he doesn't want to know where the One Piece is. He doesn't even want to know if it exists because it makes the adventure more fun. He says that if Rayleigh tells them anything about the One Piece, then he'll straight up quit being a pirate, and this fits Luffy's character so well that it makes you smile when you hear it. Rayleigh then asks Luffy if he thinks that he can conquer the most powerful oceans in the world, and Luffy says that he doesn't plan on conquering anything, because the freest person in the world is the king of the pirates. This is an absolutely iconic Luffy moment because it fits his character perfectly and embodies everything that we've been shown about him so far. The carefree, adventure-loving kid isn't so carefree when his adventure could potentially become predictable, and this just goes to show how much he loves chasing his dream. The One Piece doesn't even have to be real, but it all calls back to what Luffy said to Kobe all the way back in chapter 2. Luffy has his eyes set on a goal, so he lives every day like it could be his last, and can die happy as long as he dies chasing his dream. This statement from our main character makes Shaggy and Rayleigh even bigger fans of him than they already were, and Rayleigh thinks that it's time to coat their ship. The only problem being that this coating is going to take 3 days, and with all the danger building up in the background, this is truly the moment that the arc takes a turn for the worst. This is because our two groups go their separate ways, and the Straw Hats are going to have to hide from an admiral for 3 days. And speaking of the admiral, he's obviously here on the archipelago, and we get to see a small glimpse of his power as he shoots a beam of light out of his foot and destroys one of the giant grove trees. Our guy Kizaru has the power of the Glint Glint fruit, and the original 3 admirals all having Logia fruits that have to do with some type of element is really cool. He begins his quick rampage on the Supernovas, while the Straw Hats apparently ran into an enemy once they left Shaggy's bar. This is the part of the arc where the Straw Hats' actions come back to bite them, but at the end of the day, they made the morally right choice, so if you're of course gonna root for them. Well, we cut away from the Straw Hats for a little bit to see what the other Supernovas are doing, and we get to see a new Devil Fruit alongside something that should have really caused some concern. We get to see Bej's really cool Castle Devil Fruit in action, but we also get to see Rouge fighting against someone that looks like Kuma. This either means that Kid and Law lost their fight, or there's something much worse going on here. Once again, for the millionth time in this video, if only we knew just how bad things were gonna get because of this one interaction. However, this is another really fun part of this arc, because it's the part where Kizaru goes on his rampage against the Supernova, once again showing us that the Straw Hats aren't ready for power like this. Aokiji was a wake-up call during Long Ring Long Land, and Kizaru is a wake-up call here, because the Supernovas are considered relative to Luffy, and he's destroying them without even trying. Now while this is going on, Luffy and the others also run into Kuma, and that's when the cat truly comes out of the bag. There are multiple Kumas on the archipelago right now, and this is the biggest problem that the Straw Hats have ever faced up to this point. point. There's also an axe-wielding boy named Sentomaru that's about to join the battle and make things exponentially harder for our heroes. This battle is the beginning of the end for our Straw Hats during this part of the story, and the way that the despair builds throughout it makes this one of the best written fights in all of One Piece. Things actually start out well because the Straw Hats are able to defeat this version of Kuma through a lot of effort, and Aruj is able to do some major damage to Kuma with his Devil Fruit. With the Straw Hats defeating their Kuma though, we strictly follow the people near Kizaru, and the ways that it's shown that he's on a different level than everybody else is honestly really cool. He literally lets them fight this version of Kuma, but always reminds them that he's in the background, and that the fight isn't over once they're done with him. He also deals with any supernova that he actually attacks with ease, kicking Aruj through a building, and taking Hawkins out without breaking a sweat. He then takes out every single supernova that he's currently fighting, and that's a big problem because Luffy and his crew are still out here fighting. That's because another version of Kuma has made his appearance, 100% confirming the multiple Kuma theory, and providing our Straw Hats with a wall that might just be too high to climb. You say it's too high to climb, but this is the Straw Hats that we're talking about, so they're able to continue to fight back, and take out their second version of Kuma by using the teamwork that they showcased in their fight against Oars and Moria. This is another moment that feels really big at the time, but the Straw Hats are still stuck on this island for 3 days, and we don't know how many versions of Kuma there are alongside Kizaru and Sentomaru. This battle against the second Kuma also took a lot out of the Straw Hats, and people like Zoro are still really reeling from the damage they took during Thriller Bark. It also looks like they're gonna get to rest for a little bit, but that isn't the case, as Sentomaru makes his first appearance alongside yet another Kuma. The versions of Kuma are honestly getting out of hand at this point, and it's here where we officially learn what they are. These things are not the real Kuma, obviously. They're cyborgs based on him called pacifistas that are the newest weapon that Dr. Vegapunk has whipped up for the Navy. This situation is a new one for the Straw Hats because they can tell that they're outmatched, and Luffy actually decides that their best course of action is to run. This sounds absolutely crazy coming out of Luffy's mouth, but the events of Drum Island, Water 7, and Enies Lobby have really taught him what it means to be a captain, and the best ways to keep his crew alive. He cares about them more than anything in the world, but their plan to run is immediately foiled when Luffy can't get Sentomaru out of the way. That combined with the pacifista is already a huge problem, and that's before Kizaru appears in front of them because he's done with his fight with the other supernovas. The first person that Kizaru targets is Zoro, and since he's the most damaged in the group, there's no way for him to get away, especially since Kizaru can't be hit by any of their attacks. This is literally the most desperate that the Straw Hats have ever been. Sure, it was bad when Robin was completely frozen during Long Ring Long Land, but Aokiji was the only one that they had to deal with, so they were able to get away and heal up their friends. Kizaru isn't the only member of the Navy here, and he's also got a mission to take the Straw Hats out here, so it looks like things are about to end right here and now. It looks like that's gonna happen, but that's when some hope is injected into the story once again, as Rayleigh comes out of nowhere and saves Zoro's life. Sabaody has been a roller coaster of emotions the entire time, with highs and lows, and I think that this moment hit so hard because of how low we got. We were legitimately about to lose one of the Straw Hats, but a member of the old guard has once again shown his faith in the new generation, like Shanks did with Luffy all those years ago, and has really taken a liking to these rookie pirates. The Straw Hats now have Rayleigh on their side, and he's holding off a literal admiral, but that doesn't mean that they're safe in the slightest. Zoro is still really struggling because of the damage he's taken, the pacifista is still getting the job done against the rest of the Straw Hats, and Luffy literally can't do anything to help because Sentomaru is too much for him to handle. They're trying their absolute hardest to listen to their captain's orders and get out of there, but it's just too much, and they start falling one by one, starting with Sanji. After this moment, the desperation is kicked into overdrive. Chopper, the youngest and most inexperienced in the group, immediately eats 3 rumble balls and turns into the uncontrollable monster that we first saw in Enies Lobby. These are the first people that have accepted him since Hiruluk and Kureha, and he knows that he could potentially lose it all, so he doesn't care what he has to do to himself to keep them. The battle of course continues, and Chopper's new power is appreciated, but he can't control it, and there's no way that he'll be able to deal with Sentomaru if Luffy couldn't. Things aren't getting any easier, but that's when things get even worse, as the real Kuma makes his appearance, his signature glove and Bible showing us that it's the real him. He's here alongside alongside everybody else that the Straw Hats already have to deal with, and he says some words to Zoro that are going to be in Luffy's nightmares for a really long time. He just casually walks up to Zoro and asks him, if you were to take a trip, where would you want to go? Then, right after he asks this, he swipes Zoro with his hand and he's nowhere to be seen, all of the Straw Hats fearing that the worst happened to him. This is the moment where a battle that was on its way to hopeless became truly hopeless. Not only is Zoro one of their best fighters, the rest of the Straw Hats are banged up beyond belief, and Kuma is a warlord of the sea, and we've had multiple arcs with the goal of taking one of these guys down. This obviously starts to freak the Straw Hats out, and we also remember that we've seen Kuma use this power on Perona before, and we never saw her again. Now we obviously know now that Zoro wasn't killed in this moment, he was just sent away from the battlefield, but the Straw Hats don't know that and think that he just got erased from existence. Now if you thought that this battle was desperate when Chopper ate 3 Rumble Balls, you haven't seen anything yet, as the Straw Hats keep getting sent away one by one. Luffy not only has some great moments of despair, Sanji does too, and I want to talk about why Sanji's reaction hits so hard here. The reason that it does is because of the events of Thriller Bark, and Sanji's actions when Kuma showed up that get overlooked because of Zoro's great moment after them. You have to remember that Sanji was also willing to take the damage that Zoro did because of how much he cares about the crew, but Zoro knocked him out and took the pain instead. Sanji once again feels like he's being saved by his crewmates when he feels like it should be the other way around, so him staying back to try to fight Kuma is an attempt to do what he's always thought that he should do. Remember, Sanji was the first one to try to save Robin back in Eni's lobby on the sea train, and he's very loyal and protective over his fellow crew members. He tries to fight Kuma off so Usopp can escape, but Kuma easily brushes him aside and ends up standing him away instead. All while this is going on, Luffy is watching, powerless to stop anything, literally just yelling at Kuma because it's all he can do. Zoro, Usopp, Sanji, and Brook all get sent away, so of course the other Straw Hats go in to help, but Luffy just wants them all to run away. The next one to go is Frankie, after Kuma easily fends off a desperate attack from Luffy, and then Nami is sent away as Luffy is still recovering from the blow he just received. Nami tries to look for Luffy for help, like Luffy has finally allowed her to do after doing things alone for so long, but he isn't able to do anything as she's sent away. Luffy once again tries desperately to do anything to Kuma, but he just teleports away, and Chopper is a mindless beast at this point, so he's the next one to go. The last Straw Hat left is Robin, and Luffy literally just went up against the entire world in order to save her, but that dedication and love for his friends still isn't enough, and she's the last to be sent away. This just leaves our happy-go-lucky main character having a panic attack on the ground, freaking out because he can't believe what just happened. After everything that they've been through together and the dangers that they've overcome, this one guy, with the help of an admiral and a giant robot, was too much for them, and Luffy has no idea what's to come of his friends. This brings us back to the beginning of the video, as Luffy can do nothing more than ask himself why he wasn't able to save the people that he cares so deeply about. There's something that we don't know about Luffy just yet that makes him absolutely hate loneliness, and this is the loneliest that he's ever been since he started his crew. He's willing to die in order to make his dream come true, but that doesn't mean that his friends are just pawns in his game, and the fact that he wasn't able to save them has completely broken him. He cries and screams because he doesn't know what else he can do, and after looking up at Kuma one last time filled with anger and sadness, Kuma says that they'll never see each other again before sending Luffy away too. We then reach the lowest point in the One Piece story so far, as even the narrator says that the Straw Hats led by Monkey D. Luffy have been eradicated on Sabaody Archipelago. The Marineford Saga is the lowest point that our characters have been at in One Piece so far, and Sabaody sets the tone for that. This entire saga is a roller coaster of emotions, and Sabaody starts that roller coaster off and leaves us in a trench. This isn't the lowest point that Luffy is going to be at in this saga, but it is the lowest point that the Straw Hat crew as a whole has ever been at. We don't even know if any of them are alive, and if they are, we don't know where they went, or if they're ever going to be able to meet up with each other again. This arc is an absolute masterpiece, and shows the Straw Hats getting truly defeated for the first time in the story. Sure, there are moments in arcs like the Alabasta arc, Long Ring Long Land, and Water 7 where things got pretty bad, but this moment really eclipses all of them. It was brought on by themselves, but they also weren't gonna just sit back as one of their friends got shot and the other got sold into slavery. This leaves the story in a weird sort of limbo because the reader has no idea what's gonna happen next, or even how how the next arc is gonna begin. This arc also set up some things that are gonna be pretty big moving forward for the saga, and I'm actually really happy that I decided to cover it this way. With that being said, I've got videos about the other arcs to make, so I think it's time to end things here. Please join me next time for whatever I post next. Please leave a like and maybe subscribe if you enjoyed the video, and I will see you guys next time. Bye bye.